The interests that drive Donald Trump. Some believe Donald Trump is driven solely by money. Others say it's power. But what if the real driving force behind it all is something deeper and more dangerous? What makes a man who's had it all still want more? This is the question that troubles, fascinates, and divides the world. Because behind every decision, every fiery speech, and every media scandal, there's an invisible gear turning, and it doesn't move by chance. Trump is not just a politician, nor just a businessman. He is a social phenomenon, a force that blends ambition, ego, and strategic genius. To understand what drives him is to understand the new global power game, a game played not with tanks, but with words, image, and influence. Get ready. In the next scenes, we'll go behind the scenes of the Trump empire and discover what truly keeps it moving, even when the whole world tries to stop it. But before diving into this universe, let's leave the like, with subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because what comes next will change the way you view power, the media, and the very fate of those who dare to challenge the system. Ambition and legacy. The flame that ignited the Trump empire. Donald Trump was never driven solely by money. And perhaps that's where those who try to understand him first make a mistake. From a young age, what drove him was the desire to be remembered. While others sought stability, he pursued greatness, even if it cost him peace. In his youth, Trump viewed New York's skyscrapers not as buildings, but as landmarks of immortality. He didn't just want to own, he wanted to leave his mark on the world. And this ambition was almost a genetic inheritance. His father, Fred Trump, was already a major name in the real estate market, but Donald wanted to surpass his father, and he did it in his own way. Bolder, more media-savvy, more provocative. Where his father saw prudence, he saw a stage. Money, for Trump, has always been fuel, never a destination. It's as if each investment was a way to reaffirm his own identity. I am the man who can do it. Few realize that this kind of ambition has two faces. One builds empires, the other burns bridges. The hunger for legacy took Trump to the top, but it also placed him before abysses few would dare to face. And it is precisely at this point that the game changes. When profit ceases to be the focus, and power becomes the true trophy. The game of business, power, risk, and influence. Trump never saw business as simple financial transactions. To him, every negotiation was a chessboard, where the real prize was. Since the 1980s, he understood that money is simply a means of amplifying voice and presence. The Atlantic City casinos, the gilded hotels, the towers bearing his name in giant letters. Everything was a message. I am in control. And in a way, this reflected the psychology of great empires. Conquering territory was less about profit and more about domination. But risk has always gone hand in hand with success. Trump has racked up bankruptcies, lawsuits, and negative headlines, yet he has still risen. Because he never played with capital alone, but with narrative. While other businessmen lost credibility, he turned defeats into marketing. A clear example is his book, The Art of the Deal, who not only sold millions but also cemented his image as a master negotiator, even amidst chaos. He understood early on that in modern capitalism, perception speaks volumes. And it was precisely this insight that led him to realize something bigger. The business world is limited. The true stage of power lies not on the stock exchanges, but in the corridors of politics. And for someone who had always played high stakes, the White House seemed like just the next logical investment. Politics as a stage. When the businessman became a symbol, when Donald Trump announced his candidacy, many laughed. They thought it was just another marketing stunt. After all, he already dominated television with The Apprentice, and his name was synonymous with spectacle. But what few understood is that Trump always treated politics as the ultimate and most lucrative business, the business of influence. He realized that the American people were tired of rehearsed speeches and saw an opportunity to transform his raw authenticity into a political brand. And it worked. The man who sold skyscrapers now sells hope, identity, and belonging. He used the cameras that once promoted his hotels to now build a nation divided between those who loved him and those who feared him. This polarization, for him, wasn't a problem. It was a strategy. Trump always knew that conflict generates attention, and attention is power. The political stage became his new casino, where the chips were votes and the stakes were America's fate. But this movement also revealed something deeper. He wasn't just gaming the system, he was rewriting the rules. From that point on, the image of the businessman turned president would cease to be a curiosity and become a symbol. And behind this symbolism lay something even more ambitious: control of the global narrative. Image, media, and manipulation. The invisible war for narrative. Trump always understood that, in the 21st century, whoever controls his image controls the world. He didn't need to please everyone. He just needed to dominate the news. Every controversial statement, every impulsive tweet, every public confrontation was meticulously calculated to fuel the attention cycle. As critics attacked him, he gained ground. It was the basic principle of modern media. It doesn't matter what they say. As long as they talk about you, Trump turned exposure into fuel and chaos into strategy. The genius and danger of this tactic is that it creates a parallel reality. By attacking the press while simultaneously relying on it, he positioned himself as both victim and protagonist of the same plot. Thus, millions began to see him as the voice of the people against the system. It's the same phenomenon that builds charismatic leaders and destroys institutions. Interestingly, the more they criticized him, the stronger he became. Trump understood that the media is like the wind. You can't stop it, but you can use it to your advantage. And it was precisely this ability to shape perceptions that led to his peak, and at the same time, the beginning of his downfall. Because when image becomes the product itself, any crack becomes a crisis. And it's at this point that ego enters the picture, revealing that Trump's true battleground was never political or economic. It was personal. The empire of the ego. Between the savior and the villain. Donald Trump built his career like someone building a fortress, brick by brick, reinforcing each wall with self-confidence. But this same confidence, which drove him to defy everything and everyone, is also what keeps him torn between love and hate. He's the kind of man who needs to be center stage, even if the theater is on fire. For Trump, silence is synonymous with irrelevance, and that to him is worse than failure. Trump's ego is both his armor and his prison. It's what makes him challenge presidents, judges, and the press without hesitation, but it's also what keeps him from admitting mistakes. He doesn't just want to win. He wants to prove he was right all along. This kind of mindset is common in leaders of great empires: Alexander, Napoleon, even Steve Jobs. They all believed the world needed to see things through their eyes. And this belief, while powerful, exacts a high price: loneliness. But there's something curious about this paradox. It's precisely this inflamed ego that makes him rise again every time the world tries to bury him. Trump thrives on challenge, chaos, and other people's doubt. And that's what makes his story unpredictable. Because every time he seems to be over, he resurfaces. And this time, not just as a businessman or politician, but as a living brand in search of redemption. The strategic return. The rebirth of a human brand. Donald Trump was never just a man. He was a living brand. And like every brand, he knows the value of a good rebranding. After leaving the White House, many bet on his oblivion, but he did the opposite. He used silence as preparation. While his adversaries celebrated his downfall, he rebuilt his image behind the scenes, testing narratives, probing the public, and reorganizing allies. What seemed like defeat was, in fact, the prelude to a new act. Trump understood that, in the game of power, whoever dictates the time wins. Instead of reacting, he waited. He turned absence into expectation, criticism into publicity, and nostalgia into fuel. When he reappeared, he was no longer the same man. He was the myth revisited. More calculated, more symbolic, more strategic. He knew that to regain the throne, it wasn't enough to repeat old speeches. He needed to reawaken the sense of mission, and so the new Trump was born. Less businessman, less politician, and more historical figure. A man who, consciously or not, learned to use his own failures as stepping stones. Now, the world watches, some with hope, others with fear, to see if this return is the final chapter, or just the beginning of a new era. In the end, perhaps the question is not what drives Donald Trump, but what moves each of us, because what we see in him, the ambition, the ego, the desire to be remembered, is in a way a mirror of our own appetite for recognition and control. The difference is that he turned it into a global spectacle. And you, what have you been doing with your ambitions? Are you building a legacy or just reacting to what the world expects of you? Trump is an uncomfortable reminder that power isn't inherited. It's earned, maintained, and sometimes lost through overconfidence. Understanding the interests that drive him is an invitation to reflect on our own limits. How far would we go to prove ourselves right? How far would we tolerate being hated in exchange for being remembered? The answers lie less in Washington and more within each of us. And if this content made you think, like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because here we go far beyond the headlines. We decipher the power, strategies, and behind-the-scenes details of the real world. And believe me, the next episode will show you that, on the global chessboard, no one plays alone, not even Trump.